Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started for this evening. We are on lesson 9 in our, well, okay, Nash, do you want me to back up for a minute, or are we okay? Okay, we're on lesson 9 for the Orientation to God's Word series that we're doing, and we're still in Exodus, but we've started to move a little faster, and we are actually going to start moving quite a bit faster after this. There's an important matter that we need to deal with tonight, and that is the giving of the law contract. Before we really look at that, though, and some of the ramifications of that, let's review quickly what we covered last time. In Lesson 8, we saw some things that were super important that we understand prior to God giving the law contract. How do we know that they were super important to understand before God gave the law contract? Silas? The things that we covered last time, how do we know that they're really, really important that we understand them before we understand what God did with the law contract? That sounds like a trick question, doesn't it? It's really pretty simple.
Well, you have God establishing that they can't follow the law.
Oh, yeah.
And then he also sets up like the laws. Not that it's coming, but he kind of sets up the law, and then he tells them that he'll bless them.
Yeah, and he wouldn't put the plagues upon them that he put upon Egypt if they obey his commands and things like that. Yeah. So all of that is the fact that it's super important because of the way God dealt with them, right? And what he was trying to help them see before giving the law. And that's the right answer. There's another right answer that's more simple than that. And that is that the law contract is given in Exodus 19. And the things that we studied last time were in Exodus 15, 16, 17, and 18. So the things that we studied come before the law contract. And so that just tells you right there that it's really important that you would know them before you learn about the law contract.
The orientation.
Yeah. Does that that's not very profound, is it? No, it's not. But it's really, really important when you study the Bible. And I think I just want to highlight this because so many times we want to learn things, like, well, I want to focus on this, I want to focus on this. When really what we need to do is learn the Bible as it's written, in the order that it's written. Because it's really hard sometimes to understand the thing over here if I haven't understood the things back here. And that's a principle that I want to convey to you guys as we go through this series. Very important principle, just to understand God's Word as it unfolds, as it lays out. And that's going to become a really important principle as we look at the things that we do tonight and then from here forward. But Silas, you were right on with the actual answer, which is there are some really important things that they learned in the wilderness as Israel exited Egypt, crossed that Red Sea. We started with the Song of Moses, right? The celebration that happened on the other side of the Red Sea. And then we saw that God took them through several different experiences on their way to Mount Sinai, on their way to that mount that he told Moses, hey, we'll meet here again and you'll worship me in this mountain. And so those we called 5 trials in the wilderness. And that's what that handout is that I gave to some of you who weren't here last time. In those 5 trials, what do you think God's purpose really was with these trials? And Silas, you've kind of begun to answer that. What was it that Israel really needed to learn? That they're sinners? Whoa, that's a heavy thing to learn. Yes?
That God is the answer to their problem.
And that God is the answer. Yeah. He's the one who has the capacity to provide what they need. But they do have need. And that's being a sinner means I have need, right? I was coming home on Middleton today, and there was a big sign that a guy had posted. He was on the corner of Middleton and Karcher Road, a pretty busy intersection. And it said, premarital sex condemns people to hell. And that was his sign. I was like, wow, that is accurate. That's true. But I don't see where he had a solution. but sometimes that's okay, right? Sometimes you just need to know, hey, there's a problem before you go looking for a solution. And so think this might work, huh?
It's a Dell laptop charger.
Okay. Well, mine's a Lenovo, but we'll see what happens. All right. Thank you. And so, but it reminded me of this idea that sometimes we need to know that there's a problem. What might have kept Israel from knowing that there's a problem? Let's back up and just address that for just a sec. Why would Israel perhaps be inclined to think there's not a problem with them, that they don't have sin like the rest of, the world, the Gentile world? Why might they think? Okay. Because God brought them into being through a supernatural, through a miracle there with Sarah and Abraham.
Even through that, I was going to say, even through that, though, as we talked about with the 10th plague, they still had to exercise a substitution
Yeah.
in order to not be sin.
Yeah, they had to make a sacrifice, even in Egypt, before they left with that last plague. And I think that's part of what God is trying to reinforce to them. There wasn't an immediate difference made between Egypt and Israel in that plague. In fact, he warns them that their firstborn could have died if they didn't have that blood over the mantle. And so, great point to remember. They are that ought to be helping them see, hey, we're not that unique, even though we are different. We are the chosen people of God, and we are, in unique relationship with God. That's a wonderful thing. However, that doesn't mean they're naturally righteous. It doesn't mean they're without sin. But they could maybe easily think there's something naturally righteous about them because of their origins, because of their heritage with God, because of their unique relationship with God. And so, in that Abrahamic covenant and so forth. We do see, though, that God actually takes some pains to teach them they do have sin, and they do have a problem. And they can't actually keep his law, right? And so this wilderness, these 5 trials in the wilderness, and for those of you who weren't here, what are those 5 things that we looked at? Just someone wants to run them off real quick. What are they?
The bitter waters of Mara,
Okay.
the no food in the trial of manna,
Mm-hmm.
no water again, the battle with the Amalekites, and then the visit of Jethro.
Yeah, fantastic. So 2 experiences of not having water, one without food, and then one with an enemy combatant coming and trying to destroy them, and then another with a visit from an outsider. And in these, I would call this the wilderness adventure school that God took Israel through in order to teach them some things. And so that first one, the bitter waters of Mara, in Exodus 15, it gets the ball rolling, and God says some unique things like, if you keep my statutes and things, I won't put any of these plagues upon you that I brought upon Egypt. And it also says another term. What is that term? It says, there he, what? You guys remember? There he proved them, right? And then we saw the no food. And how did Israel respond to that no food situation? Were they like, oh, yay, we're in a place of need, and we know that God fulfills our needs, so let's just call out to God, and He will provide. Was that their attitude, Becca? No, would to God you would have left us in Egypt near the flesh pots, because what? You're just going to bring us out into the desert to kill us with hunger? They were, yeah. And that progressed and progressed even to the point of in the second no water situation, they're about ready to stone Moses. They're so angry. So they're out in the wilderness and they're being tested. They're being proved. And what's being proved is that they're not learning how to ask for the help that they need. They're not recognizing their need. And so there's some issues there. though God is being faithful to them, though God is being gentle with them and leading them by the hand and bringing them out, and He's providing in a gracious, fatherly type manner the things that they need, they are not really picking that up. And in fact, we saw that in Exodus 17 at the manna, He says very clearly, I will prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. Right? And how did He do that? He gave them simple instructions. You're going to pick up so much manna each day, but on the sixth day, you're going to pick up twice as much. And on the seventh day, you're not going to go out and pick up any because there won't be any. And that didn't really go very well. They couldn't even follow those simple commandments, which, you know what? I'm not going to blame them as being different than myself. I may not have either. I probably would have been like, is there a man out there on Sunday? Just checking. And I just and maybe we should take in maybe a little bit more because you never know. But God proved them, and at the end of that chapter it says very clearly, how long will you refuse to walk in my law and my commandments? How long will you refuse to obey my commandments?
Deuteronomy 22-29.
No, that's Exodus 17. Yeah. So that in that wilderness adventure school, there's some big lessons that they're to learn, and that also comes along with it is this. This is really the big lesson, that God is Jehovah and He has unlimited capacity to provide whatever they need. But they are not really seeing that need, and that's not really jiving with them. But we did see 2 more Jehovah names actually given during those 5 trials in the wilderness. What were they, if you can recall? You guys remember? What's that? Okay, that actually was Abraham quite a bit ago. Nice try. That is one of the Jehovah names. That's Jehovah Jireh, which is I am your provider. Yeah. Jehovah Ropheka. Yeah. Which was at the bitter waters of Marah, which was I am the Lord that what? Healeth thee. Yeah, that heals. Yeah. Okay. And then the next one was the battle with the Amalekites. Yeah. And that one, fascinatingly enough, the King James Bible just throws it right in there. Jehovah Nissi. And what is that?
Victorious banner or champion.
Yeah, I'm your victorious banner. I'm your banner of conquest or your conquering hero, right? And so 2 more names get given that are those really neat Jehovah compound names. I am fill in that blank, and he filled in a couple more blanks in this Wilderness Adventure School experience. So what a wonderful thing he's teaching them. Part of that, of course, is that they are incapable of keeping his law, being a faithful son. That is not something that they have the capacity for. He taught them that. And then he brought them to Exodus 19. He brought them to Mount Sinai. And in Exodus 19, we saw this, but let's go ahead and turn there. And while you're turning there, let me ask you a couple other things, though. Do you think Israel learned the lesson from their experience in the wilderness? Do you think they learned the lessons that God was trying to teach them? I know on me, I have no up here, but I don't think they did either. And how do we really know that? Well, because when we get to Exodus 19, and let's read that together. Exodus 19, verse 3. And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So God lays out before them the opportunity to enter into a law contract, saying, hey, if you guys can obey my voice and keep my commandments, you're going to be this holy people, this kingdom of priests. But in Exodus 17, just 2 chapters back, God said, I'm going to prove them whether they can walk in my law or no. And then he demonstrated to them that they could not. In all those 5 trials, there's a demonstration that they are not sufficient of themselves. They don't have the ability to walk in righteousness and to really do those things, to be that holy nation, to be that kingdom of priests. Now God, though, and as God sees their unlearning heart, stiff-necked is a word that the scripture uses oftentimes, right, of Israel. You're stiff-necked people. It means you're not willing to turn your head. Repent means to turn your head. It means to change your mind. It's to be changed in your thinking. There's a lack of that. God is seeing that. And so what he does now, he says, okay, I've tried to teach you these things, but let's see if you've learned the lesson. Do you think they've learned the lesson? I'm going to say no. How do I know they've not learned the lesson? Well, because when God says this to them, verse 7 and 8, and Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord hath spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. So what does that mean? That means they just said, oh sure, yeah, we can keep your commandments, Lord. Yep, we'll do it. Even though God's been teaching them that that's really not possible for them. And it wouldn't be possible for us either. And we saw that that's the purpose of the law, and is to demonstrate sin. And we ended with that last time, right? That the law wasn't given to make them more holy and righteous. I mean, if they could do it, then it would do that. But the law was given to demonstrate their sin and to prove their sin. And so, but they didn't have to go under the law to learn that. God tried to teach them that beforehand. Now, however, they may have to learn it a more difficult way. And so, they say, yeah, we can do it. All that the Lord has said we will do. That tells me they haven't learned this lesson. All right. Well, let's now pick this up. They've said, yep, we're willing to accept your commands and your and things, and we'll do it. As they accept this, though, I'm curious, how is this going to affect their relationship with God? So far, God has been graciously providing and meeting them in their need, right? In fact, he called them a certain thing when he was going to retrieve them and redeem them out of Egypt. What was it? My son. Moses, you tell Pharaoh, let my son go, even my firstborn. In fact, he says it this way, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. Let my son go. God's been treating them like a son. And he's been trying to bring them up, bring them to himself, make them a part of what he is doing in a gracious way. But it appears that they are rejecting that. And so my thinking is, okay, how is this law contract going to change that? Is it going to change that? Is it going to affect the kind of relationship that they have with God? Remember, God just said, you've seen what I did to the Egyptians, right? He fought those battles for them, redeemed them, and so forth from the Egyptians, and how I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. How did God treat them? He bore them on eagle's wings. Like he bore them up himself. He carried them. And he provided for them. Is that going to change? He's asking them to think about that relationship that they've been having. Well, I think it will probably change. And I think that this is going to be something that is going to actually change things quite a bit. What's the first... and let me ask you another question. Do you think God thinks Israel is going to have success with the law contract? Well, he's already proved them that they can't do it. I don't think he does either. What's the reference that tells us that, Silas? This is the one you were thinking about. That's the Deuteronomy 5, verses 23 through 29. Yeah. And that's a really great reference to have jotted down, where he says, oh, that there were such a heart in them that they should keep what I can do. And it's a lament that there isn't that heart in them. Deuteronomy 5, 22 through 29. Okay, well, what happens here that might indicate that there might be a change in their relationship with God? What immediately happens, and we didn't focus on this, but let's ask the question. We did talk about it briefly last time. What immediately happens that demonstrates things are going to change between God and Israel?
His instructions become more strict. Much more strict.
It becomes much more strict, and not so, oh, hey, I'm trying to bring you to myself, and I'm trying to treat you, like this intimate person that I want to share my business with. It becomes very different than that, doesn't it?
More on the face of it, transactional.
Yeah, we could say transactional. Contractional, I think, is a great term. Watch what happens. Watch how God's demeanor changes. Verse 9. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. That the people would believe Moses. That's interesting. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. Verse 10, And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Sanctify them. Okay, that's an interesting term. You go and you tell the people, or you go and you sanctify the people, and let them wash their clothes. Be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that ye go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be surely put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned, or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet soundeth long, they shall come up to the mount. Whoa, what's going on? Do you see how things are changing? God says, okay, I'm going to come down in the midst of you on this mountain. But obviously because his presence is going to be there, that mountain is going to be holy. It's going to be a sanctified place. And he says, and for you to come out and meet me, you guys need to prepare. You need to be sanctified. You need to wash your clothes. You need to prepare yourselves. And on the third day, you can come out and meet me. But don't touch that mountain, because you will die if you touch it, because my holiness will be there. I will be there. And you're going to have to wait. And then when you hear the trumpet, then you can come out and you can approach the mountain, but don't touch it. And so there's all these things, right, that things start getting serious. Okay? Yeah.
You could just do that if you touch the mountain.
You'll just die. Sure. Goes on to describe this incident. We're going to take time to read a whole lot more, but I will read you the last part of this chapter. And I would encourage you, spend some time in this chapter thinking about what God has just done in chapters 15, 16, 17, and 18, and now what's going on. And think about the difference that you see in the way God interacts with Israel. But watch this. Verse 20, the Lord comes down on the top of the mountain. Verse 21, the Lord said to Moses, Go down, charge the people, lest they break through unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. And let the priests also, which come near the Lord, sanctify themselves, lest the Lord break forth upon them. And Gavin, to your point, I'm not sure that it would be just the people executing that judgment on each other. It almost sounds like God might do something. But anyway, and Moses said unto the Lord, The people cannot come up to the Mount Sinai, for thou chargest us, saying, Set bounds about the mount and sanctify it. He's like, I've already put boundaries around this thing. And watch this. And the Lord said unto him, Away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou and Aaron with thee, but let not the priests and the people break through to come up unto the Lord, lest he break forth upon them. God has interacted with Moses. Moses has gone up that mountain, down that mountain, up that mountain, down that mountain. And God's saying, and Moses came back up to hear the commandments of God. And God says, you better get right back down and make sure those people don't come near this mountain, because I will break through upon them. And Moses is going, I did. I set bounds. He's like, nope, get right back down there, and you warn them, don't come near the mountain. So this is the kind of thing that I think, should really highlight the fact that God is doing something different here. And this law contract isn't about, so many people say that the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament, right? And this is where the God of the Old Testament gets that kind of bad reputation, right? Yeah, this judgmental, severe reputation. He's not a different God by any means. What's happening, though, is he's beginning to deal with the people on the basis of their own merit rather than through his grace. You guys catch that? He's beginning to interact with them on the basis of what they deserve and what the distinction is between their sinfulness and his holiness. Right? He's beginning to actually deal with them on that because what they've contracted to do is to be holy, like him. Is to make themselves holy on their own merit. And so, fascinating as God looks at that and goes, okay, well, if you're going to be dealt with on the basis of your own merit, this is the deal. You can't come near to me because I'm holy, and if you do, you'll die. And so he begins to set these things down. Silas, you have a comment?
It's like he's making it really clear that Moses is now the one that
they're going to deal with Moses. Yeah.
They have no interaction with God.
I highlighted that just a little bit earlier. But Moses becomes this mediator, right? And we're going to see Moses walk in that role quite a bit. But yes, we'll even see that more later. But okay, I want you to realize something. There's a couple things that God does from here. Next chapter is the Ten Commandments. God gives them a sampling of the law. And kind of in summary form. And so he gives them 10 commandments that kind of encapsulate the whole tenor of the law, okay, and what it will be like, what his commands will be like. Then he also gives commands and outlines consequences for breaking certain commandments and for doing certain things. And things like Exodus 21:12, he that smiteth a man so that he die, shall be surely put to death. And if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee to. But if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar, that he may die. He that smiteth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. He that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So he's giving them this tenor of the law, right? He's like, look, this is what this is going to be like, and it's pretty severe. That goes on, and then in chapter 23, God gives explains some more of these things, and at the end of that, God in chapter 24, God actually has a confirming or a ratifying of the law covenant with Israel, where Moses recites in the ears of the people all these words, and they hear it. And in fact, this happens 3 times, where God says it to them through Moses, they receive it and say, yep, we'll do it. And then Moses writes it all down and then recites it again, and they say, yep, we'll do it. And then blood is sprinkled upon them. And that's recorded in chapter 24. And that's when the law is really confirmed or ratified with them. Okay, and so what I want you to see is that God demonstrates this is what this law contract looks like. Now, we know that there's a whole lot more commandments that get added to the law than just Exodus 20, 21, 22, and 23. But they're a summation. They're a representation of that bigger package. And it's as if God wants the people to know what they're getting into before they actually sign on the dotted line.
So they still had the outs.
Oh, they absolutely. Yes, they did have the outs. They still had the option to say no.
Multiple chances.
This is what's really important for us to see, is he does give them multiple chances. And he does it in a manner that's pretty severe, right? He demonstrates, hey, our relationship is changing, and this is the kind of consequences that will be enacted upon you for failure, and there's going to be another list of consequences that they're going to get. But even before they move on to that stage, and we're going to look at that in Leviticus, right now, he wants them to know, and he wants to have multiple opportunities before they actually sign on the dotted line, before it's really fast and binding. Silas. It's possible. There's some things that God outlines. You're getting ahead of us, so I'm not going to address that too much. There are things that God outlines that they do need to go through because it's built in. Does that mean he can't act out of his grace toward them? No, he can, and he reserves himself that right. But you're getting ahead of yourself, so we'll just continue here. So far, we've seen this 5 trials in the wilderness now, and then we've seen the giving of the law contract. Okay, now here's a simple question: is that law contract going to bring Israel closer to God or cause a separation? What do you think so far, based on the demeanor change and different things that we've just seen? Do we have enough information to answer that question? I think we do. So what do you think? Is the law contract going to bring Israel closer to God or cause a separation? Sorry, it's an either or, isn't it? Gavin said yes, but I'm not sure which part he's saying yes to.
Oh, I was waiting for someone else to say.
Okay, yeah. So okay. What do you guys think? Separation. Do you think it's going to cause a separation? Anybody think something different? Or I think so too. I think it's going to cause a separation. Consider mankind's history. Have we seen before God offer an intimate relationship? Think about this. Have we seen God offer an intimate relationship to mankind? Only for man to then turn around and reject that, to pursue the ultimate goal without God's help. Yeah, we kind of did, didn't we? We saw that back in the garden, didn't we? Yeah. Do you think Israel's walking a similar experience? I think so. Like, no, God, we don't need you to provide for us to be a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. We'll do it ourselves. We'll follow your commandments and we'll make it happen. And God's going, yeah, okay, we'll see. Let's see how this plays out. I think, guys, this is real interesting for us to ponder these kinds of things, okay? All right, so clues to answering that. Well, we saw God's demeanor change. We saw this conditional reward punishment kind of relationship being enacted under the law contract, right? Now, let's consider the tabernacle. The tabernacle. Okay. Let's think about this. A lot of people are like, you think about the tabernacle and you think about, oh yeah, God's putting his presence among the people and he's going to dwell with them and so forth. That's kind of true. But isn't the tabernacle a little bit like that mountain? Like, who's able to really go into the tabernacle? Can just anybody walk in and be like, hey, God, how's it doing, man? I want to worship you. I want to come before you. And, it's like, what happens? No. You die. You don't go in there. The high priest only goes into the Holy of Holies, how many? Once a year, very prescribed manner, very, very, scripted, and like, this is how you do this.
And he still had bells on his uniform, so if we
Yeah.
they would know.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we don't hear him, man. It's been a couple hours. We got to, I think they used to tie a rope to him or something like that, and they could pull him out. Okay, so, like, that's crazy, right? And we're going to look at that tabernacle here in just a minute. But let's think about that. But there's also this idea of this clean and unclean. Remember that? Wash your clothes and sanctify yourselves and this kind of stuff. Was God like, hey, Israel, you guys are dirty birdies. You need to jump in the water before you come out of Egypt before I can walk you through the wilderness? Did he say anything? He didn't really do that, right? But this is becoming an issue. And so this is a fascinating example of, okay, another thing that changes and that God begins to institute with this law contract. All right, let's look at the tabernacle complex. Let's talk about that for a moment. You've got, and this is really what most of the rest of Exodus goes on to describe, is the building of the tabernacle. Okay? And so that's why we want to think about it. You have this this courtyard that surrounds it that people can enter through. And this is a fascinating detail. Israelites started out coming to the altar here and making their own sacrifices. That changes pretty quickly. where only the priests are going to make those sacrifices for them. It started out with Israel bringing their sacrifices here, and then that changed, and the priests, and then God says, no, let the priests just do it. It's something you can, I don't have the reference right on the top of my head, but it's fascinating detail that you pick up through this. But anyway, this is where they would approach. They would approach here. Sacrifices would be made here, and blood would be applied to that altar on the tip of that had these 4 horns on the corners, and it would be applied there and so forth. Burnt offerings would be made there and so forth and so on. And then there's a bronze laver and things. And this is for washing, for the priests to wash in. And the priests were going to enter into the holy place. They would need to be washed. They would need to wash themselves. They needed to make sure they were clean in that bronze laver. They would also be needing to be wearing appropriate attire that was prescripted for them. So they could enter in here to have the table of the showbread, to offer offer incense on the incense altar, and take care of the lampstand and so forth. So priests could enter into here, but could anybody else enter into the holy place? Nobody else could enter into that holy place, no. And then, of course, the priests weren't allowed to go back into the Holy of Holies. And we know that back in there was the Ark of the Covenant. And what's on top of the Ark of the Covenant? What's it described as? You guys remember? The mercy seat. Yeah, it's a couple of cherubim. His wings are reaching out to each other. And we call that the mercy seat. And fascinating, on the back wall of that are these 2 huge cherubim with their wings spread out and touching one another. And that represents kind of that throne of God and that mercy seat that would be his presence, so to speak, there. And once a year, the high priest will go back there to approach in the Day of Atonement. But here's the thing. Think about this. This thing has walls around it. It's got these thick curtains and things around it. It's got a real thick curtain separating the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And God's back in there. His presence is supposed to be back there in the Holy of Holies. Is this a, hey, Israel, come as you are. The doors are open. No, it's not, is it? This is more of a, hey, you better stand back, because if you get too close, you'll get hurt. Does that make sense? And the only way to approach is right here, and it's through a death, blood sacrifice. And that's as close as you get, and then Israel stopped being able to even do that. And God's like, let the priest do it. That's different, guys. And I think I want to impress that upon you. Think about what's going on here. This isn't God like putting his presence right among people and be like, hey, doors are open. That's not what God's doing. There's a separation here. In fact, it reminds me a little bit more of something like this, right? There's bars and there's separation, because if you get too close, you're going to get hurt. That's the kind of picture that I think about when I think about this. All right? So this tabernacle really is kind of a means of God separating himself from the people, but also allowing himself to be near them, but with separation. So it's kind of like that zoo experience, right? Like you can be close and you can kind of see the animal, you can kind of see the bear over there, but there's a wall and there's a thing and there's this big thick glass, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can kind of see it, but you can't get too close. It is that kind of experience. Now think back about, say, Noah. This says Noah walked with God, right? Or Enoch. Enoch walked with God. Was this their experience? No, it wasn't. God was walking in grace. He was walking in grace with them. He was not dealing with them on the basis of what they deserved. And so these are the kinds of things that I think we can begin to make sense of. What is God trying to do with the law contract? What is it that his purpose is with it? Well, it's not to make it a more intimate father-son relationship. In fact, I think it's the opposite, right? It's a contractual relationship. If you do this, then I'll do this. If you do something else, then I'll do something else. And there will be these consequences and rewards and so forth. But mostly it's going to be like these consequences. And so really it's more rules that separate them rather than draw them together. And rules like the unclean rules and so forth that say, hey, because God is in your midst, the whole camp needs to be clean. And so if you touch a dead body, you're unclean. If you touch a dead animal carcass, you're unclean. If a woman has a baby, she's unclean for a certain amount of time. All these kinds of things become the way God says this is how we're going to interact. And so sometimes maybe we don't apply our minds to go, what does that mean? What is God doing with that? And I think this is what we want to be challenged with here. All right? All right. Well, God is certainly establishing kind of a new definition of the situation, right? It's not like that father-son thing. It's more like I'm a holy God and you're an unholy, filthy thing, and we don't mix well. That's really kind of what it's like. So watch yourself and don't get too close, right? That's kind of what's being created here. In the law itself, let's look at that and what it does to their relationship. The law itself. Turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, and then we're going to move along to Leviticus. But Deuteronomy 4, this is a passage that is oftentimes quoted when thinking about the law. All right. We'll begin reading verse 1. Deuteronomy 4, verse 1, but we're going to work down to verse 7. Now, therefore, hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you for to do them, that you may live, and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers giveth you. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that followed Baal Peor, the Lord thy God hath destroyed them from among you. But ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day. Here's an example of the judgment that God wrought against them, and just actually killed a whole bunch of them. Baal Peor. That was when the folks were intermixing with that other, I think it's the Midianites, nation, and then they started to worship their gods and so forth. And anyway, behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Okay. If they can do the law, that's what it will do. Other nations will look at them and say, wow, that's a unique people. They appear to be wise. They appear to be righteous and understanding. For what nation is so great that hath God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? So the point is that it would make the other nations go, oh, okay, they're really close to the true and living God, right? They have this, like, what other nation is there that has that kind of relationship with God? It demonstrates some wonderful things: good civic society, good organization in the nation. This idea of the priests and the worship and the all of that, it demonstrates a kind of a wisdom, like God says, and it would make them feel separated from other nations, right? It would make them seem different, and that's probably a good thing too, if they're the unique called people of the Lord. But if they don't keep it, what have we already seen? Well, God has already, by this point in Deuteronomy, we haven't seen it much, but just think for a moment. What happens as Moses goes up the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, and God writes them on those 2 stone tablets? What's going on back in the camp?
What are the people doing?
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, Aaron, we don't know what's become of Moses, but why don't you make us some gods so we can worship them? And so Aaron fashions a golden calf. They take off their gold jewelry and give it to him, and he fashions this golden calf. And then they start worshiping this and dancing around and having like a, orgy party thing. All because Moses is delayed up on the mountain for, 40 days. That's how quickly the failure comes. And guys, that's in Exodus. That's like Exodus 30, right? As after God gives Moses the commandments of the tabernacle and stuff, and they're putting those things together, the people are down and they're like, well, we don't know what happened to Moses, but we need a God to worship, and we're kind of getting bored. Upon that, Moses tells the people, hey, and the Levites put on their swords and they go about and they start killing people who are engaged in this. So, what's the likelihood? Well, it's not. And I think, so it's not likely. I don't think that they're going to, so if they don't keep the law, that's that. And that judgment that takes place is enacted on individuals by the other people in the group. And Gavin, you were talking about this. They're commanded to enact judgment against each other, the stoning of folks and things like that. But then there's also where God will judge the nation as a whole for not following the law. Okay? And this is where we want to get into this next outline, this next thing, where God is going to actually lay out for Israel what their history will be like if they fail to keep the commandments, and if they fail as a nation to obey the law, or if they succeed as a nation to keep the law. And this is over in Leviticus. And so this is the next thing that I want you to take a look at. The law essentially says, here's your future. If you keep it, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you'll be cursed by God. Okay? And God lays it right out for them in chapter 26 of Leviticus. Let's turn there now. And I've got a handout for this, so don't feel like you got to jot a whole bunch of things down. I'll give that to you here in just a minute. It's just so you know. But let's begin in the beginning of the chapter. Verses 3 through 13 are really God laying out the blessings that they could experience if, as a nation, they keep the law. And so we'll read through this quickly, but we'll get a little context from verse 1. Leviticus 26, verse 1. You shall make no idols, nor graven image, neither rear ye up a standing image, neither shall ye set up any image of stone in your land to bow down unto it, for I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. And your threshing shall reach unto the vintage, and the vintage shall reach unto the sowing time, and you shall eat your bread to the full, and dwell in your land safely. And I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will rid evil beasts out of the land, neither shall the sword go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. And 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. And your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. For I will have respect unto you, and make you fruitful, and multiply you, and establish my covenant with you. And you shall eat old store, and bring forth the old because of the new. And I will set my tabernacle among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be bondmen, and I have broken the bands of your yoke, and made you go upright. Okay, those are the blessings. Notice the categories of blessings. What kind of categories did you see in there? What kind of things did he highlight that would be blessings that they would experience?
Food and water.
Yeah, food and water.
Protection from their enemies.
Absolutely, protection from enemies. Yep.
And general prosperity.
Exactly. Isn't that interesting the way he describes that that growing season? You will your vintage, your threshing shall reach unto the vintage, and vintage shall reach unto the sowing. That kind of fascinating, that kind of the way he says, hey, man, you're never going to be without food. Like, it's just going to come, and it's going to come, and you're going to take out the old because of the new. It's like, hey, man, we need room. So bring that old stuff out and let's use it because we got to put new stuff in. And, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the enemies. 5 of you will put 100 to flight. 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. Okay? And so, and notice and my soul shall not abhor you. Okay. Those are the blessings. Those are the blessings. Yeah, that's kind of nice, isn't it? Okay, my soul's not going to abhor you. I appreciate that. Those are the blessings. So 3 through 13, 10 verses of blessings. Now you're going to get the curses, or the punishments, from verse 14 down to the end of the chapter. All right? A little bit longer list here. These are the curses. Let's begin in verse 14. But if ye will not hearken unto me, and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if your soul shall abhor my judgments, so that ye will not do all my commandments, but that ye break my covenant, I also will do this unto you. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague, that shall consume the eyes, and cause sorrow of heart, and ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I will set my face against you, and ye shall be slain before your enemies. They that hate you shall reign over you, and you shall flee when none pursueth you. That's the first punishment. That does sound kind of rough. It's kind of a lot all at once, isn't it? It's not as severe as you might think when it says your enemies shall reign over you. It's not like they're being conquered immediately. That's not what's happening. That's tributary rule being established. So let's walk through this. I will also do this unto you. I will even point over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague. So he's going to give them what? Those diseases, those plagues that he highlighted back in Exodus 15. Hey, I'm not going to put this upon you if you can keep my commandments. He's going to put those things upon them. You can give them those diseases. Cause sorrow of heart and so forth. Yes?
You will plant seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. Reminds me of Gideon's time.
Yes, and actually,
Raided by the Midianites.
absolutely. And this is what you ought to be doing. As you read these things, start thinking about Israel's history. Start thinking about the stories that you know of what Israel experiences throughout their history. Because you're exactly right. The things that Gideon down in a hole, threshing, right? He's hiding it. You know why? He's hiding it from the Midianites. Why? Because they're going to come and take it from him. And that's what they've been doing. That's your enemies shall rule over you. That's that concept. They're not going to be able to stand against their enemies, so their enemies are going to come in and steal their stuff, okay? And put them to tributary submission to their enemies, right? So they will pay taxes. They will pay food taxes and stuff for protection against their enemies. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the first one. Watch how this builds. That's the first. Verse 18. And if ye will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. And I will break the pride of your power. And I will make your heaven as iron, and your earth as brass. And your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land shall not yield her increase, neither shall the trees of the land yield their fruits. That's the second. Breaking the pride of their power, and making their heaven as iron and their earth as brass, so that the earth doesn't produce. Under the first punishment, earth is still producing very well. It's just their enemies are stealing their food. Under the second one, the way the ground produces changes. Okay? It would be more famine-like, okay? But then there's also this breaking of the pride of their power, which we'll explain that a little bit more as we go. I believe that is a governmental judgment where there's a breaking of the governmental power structure. And you can begin to think about Israel's history and what that might be and when that occurred. But what you're seeing here are punishments that are layered. The first one happens, and that gets instituted, and that kind of remains, and the other one then gets added on top of it, okay? And it's almost like courses, all right? And I've heard it described by a Bible teacher I have a ton of respect for, Keith Blades, who calls it the courses of punishment. And I think that makes really good sense to describe it that way. Because the one is given, and then the next one is laid on top of that one, and the next one comes and is laid on top of that one. Okay, so let's see the next one. Verse 21, and if ye walk contrary unto me and will not hearken unto me, I will bring 7 times more plagues upon you according to your sins. Notice that transition statement is repeated again. I'll bring 7 times more plagues upon you. And so here he goes. Verse 22 is the third. I will also send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children and destroy your cattle and make you few in number, and your highways shall be desolate. Okay, that's all of number 3. Course number 3. Wild beasts among them, rob you of your children, destroy your cattle, and make you few in number, and your highways shall be desolate. I believe that is, so not just wild beasts coming in and killing them and causing havoc, that will happen, but there's also the highways being desolate. What happens if there aren't trucks running up and down the highway? What would take place if we don't have big trucks moving goods up and down the highway?
Again, no food.
You got no food. You got no commerce going on, right? It's because there's no food to be traded and there's no money to be traded. So commerce is like coming to a halt. That's what he's describing with that, where your highways are desolate.
Those also seem to be inversions from the blessings of I will increase your population.
Absolutely.
And drive wild beasts from the land.
Yes.
So now
Wild beasts will come in.
Population will diminish.
Yep. So you are seeing that. You're seeing it flipped. The blessings are now all being flipped over. And so yes, wild beasts is one of that, make you few in number, population decrease. All right, verse 23, another transition statement. If ye will not be reformed by me by these things, but will walk contrary unto me, then I will also walk contrary unto you, and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. And so it's building. If you're walking contrary unto me, God says, I will walk contrary unto you. Verse 25, and I will bring a sword upon you, that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant, and when you are gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. And when I have broken the staff of your bread, 10 women shall break your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. That's course number 4. What's going on here? This is different. It's different than course number 1. When I think about this, course number 1, the Midianites come in, make a raid, take their stuff, the Midianites leave. Okay? But they're still out in the fields, still growing, still producing things, right? Still doing all that stuff. Israel is. But the enemies come in and take that food. They take the harvest. They take the fruit that's brought in. This one, things are changing. It says, I'm going to bring the sword against you, and when you're gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. Okay, gathered together in their cities. What does that mean? Siege, yes. That means enemies are actually going to start encroaching. And they're going to start taking over some of your land. Instead of you out in the fields producing food, your enemies are going to take those fields. And they're going to be your enemies because you're going to be back in a walled city trying to hide and protect yourself from the enemy. So siege is going to take place. And he says when you're back in that walled city, what's going to happen? Pestilence is going to come in. So there's going to be more disease and more famine. And you're going to bake your bread. 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. 10 women using one oven and going, okay, you get this little portion, here you go, and you get this little portion, here you go. And everyone's going, that's not even close to enough. And this is actually really, really sad because this reduces Israel to some really rough things. Now watch the next one. So that was 4, okay? That was the 4th. And again, I'll give you a handout that describes all 4 of these. So, but watch this final one. This 5th and final is rough. Verse 27, and if ye will not for all this hearken unto me, but walk contrary unto me, then I will walk contrary unto you also in fury. And I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. Look at that. God says, I'm not just going to walk contrary unto you, I'm going to walk contrary to you in fury. Verse 29, and you shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters shall ye eat. And I will destroy your high places, and cut down your images, and cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. And I will make your cities waste and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. And I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. And I will scatter you among the heathen, and will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. That's the fifth course of punishment. And that's the final one. What happens here? Utter destruction, right? Utter destruction. In fact, things get so bad that he says, you're going to eat your sons and daughters. That famine where you have nothing to eat gets so bad that they are going to actually turn to cannibalism and eat their children to try to stay alive. And you can probably think of a story. This is one of those moments where King Solomon actually, no. It's not that story. It's later. There's a story where some women bring a case to a king, and the one says, we agreed to eat our children, and so we ate my child yesterday, and today we're supposed to eat her child, but she doesn't want to give up her child. And so they bring this matter before the king. It's really, really horrible. But God says, I will destroy your high places and cut down your images and cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. Wait a minute. They're not supposed to have any idols in the land. They're not supposed to be rearing up any of these things. Does Israel end up worshiping idols? Yeah, they do. And God's calling it out right now before it ever even takes place. He says, this is what's going to happen. And I'll bring your cities waste. I'll make your cities waste. Bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. I'll not smell the savor of your sweet odors. So those sacrifices and things that they bring, he says, it's not going to matter. And I'll bring in the land into desolation. Your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. So the enemies are actually going to take over their land. And they, Israel, are going to be removed from the land. Okay? They're going to be exiled out of the land. And you probably think, in your mind, what is that? You probably think of certain nations that actually do that and accomplish that against Israel. If you've been, walking through your Bible and reading it and going through Sunday school and stuff like that, you probably have some of this stuff in your mind. And what you should see, guys, and this is the crazy thing, is that what God just did here in Leviticus chapter 26 is he just gave you an outline for the rest of Israel's history. This becomes their experience. This becomes their history. And you can walk right through the scriptures, the historical books, and follow the 5 courses of punishment. And we're going to do that. I'll show that to you. We're going to show you where the first one starts, and then where the second one begins, and then where the third one begins, and so forth and so on. And we're going to walk right through that story according to this outline. This works as a timeline outline for Israel's history from here forward. Sadly enough. But that's what it does. Let me give you these. Take one and pass, please. So we're going to walk through. We're going to continue to follow the story. But we're going to see these things unfold upon the people. And this last one is a drawn out, it's a protracted one, this 5th and final one. In fact, let me just read a little bit to you about that, and then we'll say a couple things and wrap up. Verse 34, that's where we left off. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land. Then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when ye dwelt upon it. And upon them that are left alive of you, I will send a faintness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies. And the sound of a shaken leaf shall chase them, and they shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursueth. So God says, even when you're out there in your enemy's lands, I'm going to send this fearful spirit in you, right? And you're always going to be afraid of a shaken leaf shall chase them, the sound of a shaken leaf, okay? And you're going to flee as fleeing from a sword when none pursue. Verse 37, and they shall fall one upon another as it were before a sword when none pursueth, and you shall have no power to stand before your enemies, and you shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And they that are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity in your enemies' lands, and also in the iniquities of your fathers shall they pine away with them. And that doesn't sound very good, does it? Just pining away in their enemies' lands in a fearful, dreadful state. But now watch this. Verse 40, if they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their trespass, which they trespass against me, and that they also have walked contrary unto me, and that I have also walked contrary unto them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if then their uncircumcised hearts be humbled, and they then accept of the punishment of their iniquity, then will I remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham will I remember, and I will remember the land. God goes on and says, I'm not going to utterly destroy you, because I've made those covenants with your fathers. I will be merciful if you call and if you acknowledge. But that's out in the fifth course of punishment. That's when they're in exile. They're removed from the land. So there is an opportunity, Silas, for them to call out for mercy. And God describes that and prescribes that. But this is something, guys, when you do a Bible survey class, this ought to be the heart of that survey. Because this is what helps you see the rest of Scripture and outlined in an outline format that you can just follow and make sense of. And we're going to do that. We're going to just follow this out. We're going to throw it up here on that timeline, and you'll see where each new course begins. We're going to see God do some merciful things in there as well, because God is a God of mercy, and he's a God of grace. And so we're going to see that also. So there are going to be some unexpected moments of grace and mercy in there. But we're going to watch this unfold in their history, unfortunately. And I've already... so yes, it is an outline of their history. And I've already probably answered some of the questions that I want to answer. But let's just conclude with this. The law. What do you think? Will Israel deserve the blessings or the curses? Man, it's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point, huh? What will their experience be? Will they get that outline, curse and bless? Will they get the curses? Will they get the blessings? Well, let's think about this. What Israel just signed up for is the law. If they can keep it, it means they're holy and righteous, and they did it all on their own. But if they fail, it means they're sinners like those Gentiles. With God, what does it mean for God? Well, it kind of looks like God's becoming impersonal, right? He's not so attentive and sensitive and gentle and approachable. He becomes more of a strict judge. He's an exactor of justice rather than that loving, benevolent father, right? But that's kind of what is called for and what's demanded. Why? Because Israel needs to learn a lesson. They need to understand that they are not naturally righteous and naturally holy and not able to live unto God in the way that they need to be able to be used by him in his plan and purpose with them, all on their own merit. They can't do that, but the law is there to teach them that. Galatians 3 talks about it. What's it called, Dad? Yeah, tutor and governor system. And what? That the law was a taskmaster or schoolmaster to bring you unto Christ. And we ended with that last time, citing some New Testament passages, especially from the epistles of Paul, that talk about the law and what its purpose was. And that's what's going on. And so as we think about that question, is Israel getting closer to God with this law contract or further away? I think it's definitely further away. And it's becoming more of a, okay, you do this, then I'm going to smack your hand. And you do this, I'm going to smack your hand. And it gets pretty bad. This is why it's so important that we understand Exodus 15, 16, 17, 18, before we get to Exodus 19. Because it's so important that we realize God taught them before he offered the law contract that they could not keep the law. Because what happens under the law? All these things in Leviticus 26. Because that law puts sin out there in a dramatic way. And as Romans 7 says, it makes sin exceeding sinful. And it brings it strength, right? In fact, 1 Corinthians 15? Oh gosh, I don't want to misquote it. I'll read it to you instead. 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 56. The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. The strength of sin is the law. The law makes sin stronger. That's Romans 7. And guys, as you experience, as we walk through this history, it's going to be rough. We're going to see some really rough things happen with Israel. And if God hadn't forewarned them, we might think, maybe God's not being fair here. Maybe he's not doing something right. But he forewarned them. And that's what's really important. So we've got to have that under biblical theology. We've got to understand that. Okay, we're gonna stop. I'll stop with my presentation. If you guys want to, ask some questions and things, go ahead.